So why is the title of this video My Gospel instead of The Gospel? Actually, I was inspired by Paul, who also wrote My Gospel as he was writing some of the verses in the Bible. What does it mean? First off, the word we have in English, gospel, is translated from the Greek word, forgive my pronunciation here, euangelion, which means a good message or good news. So, yeah, I have good news. And that's what this video is about for me. It's about good news. Sort of the old story of the good news of faith, but also my story and how they intersect. I want to start with the story of faith. So if you have a Bible and you want to jump there with me, it's Luke chapter 4, starting in verse 14. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread throughout the whole countryside. He taught in their synagogues, and everyone praised him. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read. The scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. He found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he's anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." So here we have this scene of Jesus headed into the Jewish temple where he'd go every week to worship God. And in case you haven't heard, yes, Jesus was Jewish. And he reads this passage from the book of Isaiah about this promise, this prophecy of an anointed one. And that word anointed one that we see translated into English, in the original Hebrew, was Meshach, which is really similar to the word Mashiach, which is the word for Messiah, which is where we get the English word for Messiah. And so Jesus is just following this Jewish custom of a man just standing up in the synagogue and reading part of the scroll, and everything is sort of normal, until this happens. Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. And the eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." That's where Jesus was basically signaling to his community, yeah, you know the Messiah that y'all have been waiting for? That's me. But let's go back to the passage he was reading from Isaiah 61 and see what he was really saying this anointed one, this Meshach of God, was meant to be. "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair." So we get this picture of a Messiah who came for the poor, brokenhearted, despairing, grieving, mourning, depressed, and the people in the dirt and the dust and the ashes. And Jesus continues this sentiment throughout his ministry, his miracles, and his acts of kindness. It says in Matthew 9:10, "While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, 'Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?'" They said it just like that, "and sinners." On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." And I guess this is a good jumping point for the reason why I'm calling this video My Gospel. Actually, I wasn't even born into a family that practiced any sort of faith. You know those Catholics that are called Christmas, Easter Catholics? Well, we were more like baptism and funeral Catholics. You come from God, you return to God, and that's really only when you think about God. But from a young age, I was really spiritually curious. And I was also really depressed. Frankly, there was a lot of pain, dysfunction, and some abuse in my family. And it really messed me up as a kid. When I was 19, I had the whole falling in love with Jesus sort of extreme spiritual experience of faith. I'm not sure if I thought that my faith would fix my problems or if I got that idea put in my head by people in the church, but it was definitely there. And that's probably what drew me to churches that preached an unhealthy message of God will fix all your problems. Suffice to say, that's not what I believe today. I'm going to be really frank. When I became a Christian at 19 years old, I came into the church with all kinds of pain and dysfunction. But actually, the rejection, the pain, the abuse that I faced in the church was far worse than anything that I had experienced in my dysfunctional family. And I know there are people watching this today who can really empathize with me. You know, I've had several friends who were so hurt by the church that they can barely walk into a church building today. But Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted and to heal the sick and to console those who are grieving and mourning and depressed. So why do so many churches do just the opposite? I knew a girl, for example, who was struggling with a chronic health condition that she needed a surgery for. And she was told by a leader in the church that because she had a messy room, she was unfit to be a full-time minister. I knew another young woman that was kicked out of a Bible school because she had a chronic health condition and she missed a final exam. And when she requested a makeup date, she was denied. So she went to go and talk to the dean of the school to ask for accommodations for disability, and the dean responded by expelling her, saying that her health condition made her an unsatisfactory student. She had a 3.9 GPA. I know another young woman who was struggling with depression, and she was sitting in the front row of a church after the service, asking for God to heal her, and just probably looking sad when a leader came up to her and rebuked her. And he said that God wasn't pleased with her because she wasn't joyful. God was disappointed with her because she was sad. And another woman who was in a small group of people praying for her, when she shared an intimate story of abuse that she had never told anyone, they told her that if she didn't immediately, right in that moment, forgive her abuser, then she was sinning, and God would be displeased with her, and she would be separated from God. Really? Really? Is that the best the church in America has to offer? Is that the best Christianity has to offer? I don't think so. And unfortunately, I have a lot more stories like that. And there are so many other people out there who have gone through the same hurt and rejection that these women have gone through. Who have been hurt by the very institution that was supposed to bring healing and comfort. And you know what the saddest part is? That each one of these stories was an opportunity for the church to step up and be a representative of the real Jesus, of the love of God, of compassion, consolation. But that's not what happened. What happened was that these women struggled because of the hurt they experienced. They struggled with self-hatred. They struggled wondering if they could continue in their faith. They struggled wondering if they could ever be part of a church again. And sometimes they even contemplated suicide. But they have something else in common. In each and every instance, they went back to the Jesus that they'd found in the Bible. And they saw that he was sent from God to bring love and compassion. And they found comfort and healing that they didn't find in the church. I know this because I am these women. And these stories are all my stories. I was depressed, and church members condemned me instead of comforting me. I was abused, and I was condemned instead of consoled. I was sick, and I was abandoned by people who I thought cared about me. I was disabled, and I was cast aside and not healed. Recently I shared this story with someone who had gone through similar things, but who had decided not just to leave the church, but leave the faith. It's actually a group of people who'd been through something like that, and they had all these questions for me, especially after I told them what I'm planning to do next. This fall, I'm going to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary to study for a Master's of Divinity. And after hearing everything I'd been through, they asked, how could you possibly still believe? How could you possibly still be going down this path? How's Jesus working for you now? My answer was, and is, that Jesus was never the problem. I've had some amazing, beautiful relationships and experiences in churches that I've been part of. But I have to be honest, the churches that I've been part of have caused so much pain and damage in my life And in this case, in these stories, it was the church that was the problem. And honestly, it's only because of the love that I felt in the person of Jesus that I've kept going, that I haven't quit. It's because of that love that I want to go to seminary, that I want to study the Bible, and that I want to maybe find a way to just help to fix this problem in the church, to maybe find a way to be a messenger of the love of God, of the loving kindness of God, and a minister of the hope and the joy and the peace and the goodness and the gentleness of Jesus, to be a minister of healing to broken hearts. That is what Jesus has done for me and is still doing for me, because I'm still very much in need of it in my long process of suffering and healing and forgiveness. That is my gospel, and it's my gospel that I want to share with the world, and that I believe will bring hope to so many people who need it. That's what's in my heart to say. At least that's my prayer. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for being interested to hear my story and my gospel. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you. May He lift up His countenance upon you, and may He give you peace. Thank you.